Hello. Thank you to the organizers for this very kind invitation. I am honored to have this opportunity to participate in today's event. The focus of my presentation today is on a fundamental premise. That is, that the global research enterprise depends on an infrastructure network that makes it possible for knowledge to be shared, discovered, used, and understood. And that these possibilities can only be fully realized when research infrastructure is open and interoperable, and when research infrastructure is understood in social as well as technical terms. So with that premise in mind, I have organized the presentation today into the following sections. I will begin by talking about my background and the general focus of my work right now and over the past 10 years or so, followed by some examples from my current work and previous work about strategic approaches that we have taken in the objectives of open research infrastructure. And then I will conclude with some personal reflections about the current state of global research infrastructure and some thoughts about the future. I also want to emphasize that all of the remarks I am sharing today are my personal views. I am not speaking on behalf of any particular group or organization. And I would also like to acknowledge that I am focusing my talk on my direct experience because there are many other people around the world who are also highly qualified to talk about this topic. So I do not intend to speak for all voices. So first, starting with some information about my background so that you have a good understanding of the context and perspective I bring to this talk. Over the past decade or so, my work has been connected by a few central areas of focus: the intersection of libraries, publishing, and research infrastructure, persistent identifiers and open metadata, and partnerships and collaborations. In my current role, I am the Director of Strategic Programs and Partnerships at DataCite, where I am in charge of our global community and services team and have responsibilities that encompass our product development work, community strategy, and relationships and partnerships with our broader community. As part of my role, I am also the director of ROAR, the Research Organization Registry. In addition to my current employment, I'm also actively involved in numerous community initiatives and activities focused on open research infrastructure, including Open Alex, Make Data Count, the US National Kids Strategy NISO Working Group, Open Citations, and some years ago, I was part of the organizing group behind PIDapalooza. Prior to joining DataCite, I worked for nearly 6 years at the California Digital Library, managing the persistent identifiers portfolio. And prior to that, I was a scholarly communications and copyright librarian at the University of California, Berkeley. And prior to that, I worked at the Public Library of Science, or PLOS, supporting editorial processes, peer review, and knowledge management at PLOS One and across the PLOS journals. So over the course of my career, I have witnessed and been a part of major shifts toward openness across the research infrastructure landscape, starting with the rise of the open access movement and mega journal publishing at PLOS and the implementation of PLOS's landmark open data policy. And then part of the growing interest in open persistent identifiers when I was at California Digital Library, and PIDapalooza was a major event that we organized for the community. And then that led to increased focus on the metadata associated with persistent identifiers and scholarship in general, and the underlying infrastructure that supports these identifiers and metadata, which is a key focus of my work today. So with this context established, I want to share some more concrete examples from my current and prior work that illustrate some different strategic approaches we have taken to driving open infrastructure for research. So first, some reflections from my work at the California Digital Library, or CDL for short. For those who may need some more context, CDL is the system-wide library for the University of California in the United States. And its mission is to provide transformative digital library services that are grounded in campus partnerships and extended through external collaborations that amplify the impact of the library's scholarship and resources of the University of California. And through that mission, CDL works across several key programs encompassing licensing and collections, library discovery, publishing, archiving, and digital collections, and digital curation. And when I was at CDL, I was part of the digital curation team and program, which we called UC3 for UC Curation Center. And we focused on covering end-to-end aspects of the research data management lifecycle, covering digital preservation, data publishing, research data management, and persistent identifiers. We adopted a big tent approach to support all aspects of the research data lifecycle, and to do this through core infrastructure, services, programs, and collaborations. Within my responsibilities on the persistent identifiers products portfolio, we focused specifically on infrastructure and services that supported Crossref DOIs, DataCite DOIs, ARC identifiers, the global N2T resolver, ROWR, which I will talk about in a moment, and ORCID API integrations. And we also were active in participating and collaborating in the global PID community through membership and partnership activities. Through all of this work, our mission at UC3 was really to focus our efforts on not being positioned as a vendor, but really as a core partner to help advance open infrastructure through persistent identifiers and other services. Our work at UC3 and at CDL in general was really guided by the strategic objective of making University of California research more open and impactful as one of the largest public universities in the world with an enormous research output. And the university has established a strategy guided by a notion of multiple pathways toward openness. In other words, it deliberately does not want to be too specific or dogmatic about an approach. And within that framework at UC3, our strategy was really to focus on supporting the underlying infrastructure that makes open access to research possible by leveraging open metadata and persistent identifiers to allow for the information about research outputs to be discovered and reused, not just to enable access to the research outputs themselves. So we supported primary services for DOI registration and also pursued different partnerships to advance this goal, for example, collaborating on the launch of ROWR. And the key is that this work would have a direct impact on the UC libraries and on the UC mission, but also help to advance open research for the broader research community around the world. So these are some examples I wanted to share about some of the strategic choices we took in my time at CDL UC3 to advance specific objectives around open research and open research infrastructure. So now I would like to share a little bit more about my work on ROWR, also known as the Research Organization Registry. ROWR is an open, free, curated database of persistent identifiers and metadata for more than 120,000 research and funding organizations around the world. We operate ROWR as a collaborative initiative across 3 different organizations: California Digital Library, Crossref, and DataCite. And ROWR provides data and APIs that are used in publishing and repository systems, as well as other integrations to disambiguate and standardize institutional data and to connect institutions to publications and other outputs. And I want to share a little bit about the origins and journey that we went through in establishing RDUF because there are some important lessons that we learned along the way that tie into the theme of today's talk. RDUF initially emerged back in 2016 as a series of collaborations across multiple organizations from around the world who were all very interested in solving the problem of how to uniquely identify the organizations involved in research and to solve this problem in an open and community-driven way. That ultimately led to the initial launch of the RDUF prototype in 2019, which was built on a seed file that had been provided by the GRID database of organizations. And following that initial launch of RDUF, we undertook subsequent work to focus on additional technical development, curation policies and processes for registry data, governance and sustainability models, and all of this being informed by community input and information along the way. So our overall strategy with RDUF back then and now in the present has been to really focus on solving a very specific problem, focusing on a very specific use case and keeping the scope very contained to that notion of the problem and use case. And with that framing, to deliver a concrete and usable infrastructure solution as quickly as possible and then keep striving to make it better. RDUF was not perfect when it launched in 2019. It's not perfect today, but we are very confident that the quality of what we have been able to offer has been broadly impactful and useful and meaningful for a wide variety of users. And we've also been very conscious with our work on RDUF to leverage the fact that we are open and the fact that we are a community-driven infrastructure as a strategic advantage, because everything that we do is transparent. Everything that we do is able to something that the community is able to participate in. And this is something that really sets RDUF apart as a piece of technical infrastructure, but also social infrastructure. And now I will share some examples from my current work at DataCite. At DataCite, we have operated for the past 16 years as both a community body and an infrastructure provider for the global research community. And our focus is really on supporting research organizations around the world to help make their outputs and activities more findable so that they can be cited and connected to other outputs and activities. This enables greater visibility and context that makes it possible for research to have a larger and more quantifiable impact. And we do this work by supporting DOI services for our member organizations to register a wide range of outputs from different types of repositories and platforms. And by making those DOIs more discoverable and usable through our structured metadata schema and through tools for retrieving and harvesting and integrating DOI metadata. We now have more than 1,700 member organizations who collectively have registered more than 100 million DOIs. And these DOIs are used actively through straightforward resolution and access, and also through our discovery interface called DataCite Commons, as well as through different harvesting integrations in downstream aggregation services and scholarly indexes. And we do all of this as a very small organization. At DataCite, we are only 22 people on staff. And our focus in terms of what we're working on now and some of the challenges that we are aiming to address now and into the future is really how to advance our overall mission of connecting research and advancing knowledge. And we're trying to do that by looking at what we can do to make membership in the DataCite community accessible for all types of organizations globally. And we are also looking at needs and challenges with regard to the precision and utility of DataCite metadata, because we know that we need DataCite metadata to be very high quality to support effective discovery, reuse, and impact. And we are also advancing different strategic collaborations through memberships and partnerships that are focused on how we can better support metadata contributions, metadata connections, metadata consumption, and metadata enrichments. And I want to share a few thoughts and reflections about some of the strategic aspects of our work right now and some of the guiding principles that we are following as we pursue these objectives. And one key aspect to our work at DataCite is really aiming to evolve and adapt as the research community evolves, while also staying true to our values and staying true to the community ethos that initiated DataCite to begin with. We are also looking at how we can define a very clear area of focus for DataCite's key service offerings and community offerings, while also creating space to innovate and to explore new frontiers. And as part of that, we are also looking at how we can extend our reach and extend the value of our services by looking at different collaborations across the community to help address shared problems at scale. And now I would like to conclude with some personal reflections on the current state of open research infrastructure and some key considerations for the future. One key reflection, thinking about where we are in the present moment, is that the current state of open research infrastructure today is very rich and exciting, and there are many successes to celebrate. I have noticed that the topics of open research and open research infrastructure have become more mainstream. They are more commonly talked about. I've also noticed an abundance of new policies and guidance at the institutional level and national level that are aimed at promoting or even requiring different practices and processes around open data and open access and open research, as well as policies and guidance around persistent identifiers and metadata in particular. There are a number of global conversations and collaborations happening around the world that are looking at opportunities to advance objectives around open research and open infrastructure. And we're also beginning to see more examples and demonstration cases and stories about the impact of what can be achieved when research and research infrastructure are more open and usable for the world. And on the other hand, I have also observed that there are still a number of constraints and challenges facing us in the present moment. And these are challenges that take many different forms. On the one hand, I think we are seeing unevenness and inconsistencies when it comes to how open research infrastructure is being accessed or implemented around the world. Not everyone right now is able to access DataCite membership, for instance, or ROR adoption has become very widespread around the world, but there are still areas where ROR adoption needs to grow. We are seeing challenges and inconsistencies when it comes to metadata quality and usability. And this is not just a DataCite problem, but really a challenge that we are seeing across the entire research infrastructure ecosystem, that as we build or attempt to build these different systems and pipelines to share information, we are able to notice areas where metadata quality is suffering. We are also at times, I would say, seeing some duplication and overlap in different efforts. And we are also seeing the risks and challenges and concerns that have arisen in recent years around economic uncertainties and political volatility. We are also seeing the promises and uncertainties brought by emerging technologies and questions about what that means for this work we are doing to build open infrastructure and make all of this data more openly available for the world. And a final reflection that I'd like to share on this topic is that over the years, while noticing many successes and accomplishments along the way, I also recognize that change takes time. And that is important to factor into this overall outlook. So in reflecting on some of these lessons and opportunities and challenges of the present moment, and lessons and opportunities as well based on some of these specific examples and experiences I have shared, I wanted to highlight a few key areas of focus that I think are key to success and key to keep in mind as we think about how to make the objectives of open research and open research infrastructure possible. And the first is to recognize and to leverage the power of collaboration, to leverage existing resources that already exist, to look at opportunities to share expertise and to learn from each other, and to invest in relationships that can drive these collaborations and ensure their success. A second takeaway point is to think smaller, is to think about how we might apply, for instance, a product development mindset to this work in a more comprehensive way by focusing on specific problems for specific sets of users, identifying iterative milestones and increments of work, focusing on how to best deliver very concrete improvements that solve user needs, and to recognize that all of this is a process and that progress is sometimes more useful than perfection. And the third is to prioritize openness, not just in terms of the infrastructure and the metadata and data itself, but also in operational aspects as a way to establish trust, to build alignment, and also to support and create different efficiencies. So when I reflect on some of these successes and challenges learned along the way, I would say that these are some of the key takeaway points that have been extremely beneficial in the work that was done at UC3, at ROAR, and at DataCite that could be applicable to other initiatives as well. So that brings me back to the premise that I began this presentation with today, which is that as a global research enterprise, we are increasingly dependent on this infrastructure network that makes it possible for knowledge to be shared, discovered, used, and understood. And that the key to unlocking these possibilities is open and interoperable infrastructure in the sense of both technical infrastructure and the social underpinnings of that infrastructure as well. So I would like to thank you for your attention and also conclude with a few questions for all of you to consider as we move into the discussion today. And what I'm curious to understand from your perspective is what are the biggest challenges that you see that's facing open research and or open research infrastructure? And can any of the examples or lessons mentioned today be useful in addressing these challenges? So thank you again, and I look forward to the conversation.